The Steelers lost a tough one to the Bengals 37-30. We're going to talk specifically about what part of the game plan specifically went wrong for the Steelers that I thought played the biggest factor in the loss. That on the offense, the defense, both sides of the ball, and what's next for the Steelers moving forward. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On Prize Picks. Anyways, let's get into this Steelers loss a bit. I talked a little bit in the little post-game reaction. I do apologize for this episode coming out so late into the evening. I had a very long day. I was at Pitt basketball before the game, then had to speed over to the game, covered the game, then had to do the post-game Locked On Now that goes on our YouTube page. And then as soon as that was done, I had to get back to my car, then jet over to Channel 11 to do Final Word. And now I'm here, and that's why I'm still in a suit recording right now. So I apologize for how late this got out for those who were looking forward to seeing this or listening to this late Sunday night, and it's coming out very early Monday morning. But again, I wanted to get into the game planning of this because, after the game, I was talking about they had their chances, and the Steelers did have their chances in this game. They were up at halftime. They were a point away for a little bit. They were less than a touchdown away for a while, and that was where I thought that they had their best chances, especially going into late into the fourth quarter. The Steelers were hanging in there. They were down by 4 points. First they were down by 3 points. They were down by 4 points. Back and forth a little bit from the middle part of the third quarter all the way until 4 minutes and 30 seconds into the fourth quarter. And to me, that's where I think the biggest problems came for the Steelers was late there. But there were also parts early on because the offense did get points. And I'm going to talk about specifically about the offense more so in the second segment. My first point is about the defense because, yes, the defense did create 2 turnovers. And yes, I'm with all the people who say this defense was, has been hung out to dry a lot this year. The Bengals had 5, 9, 13 possessions, I believe, on offense, putting the Steelers back on the field. 12 when they were on the field for a lot of possessions, a lot of plays in this game. The Steelers did a better job with time possession they do in normal games, but still, that was a lot of plays. The Steelers defense was out there because of a lot of the 3 and outs that happened in the second half. Still, there were plays where the Bengals were able to get their points in their biggest moments because I felt like they keyed in on the right matchups at the right times. And this is where the credit goes to the Bengals scheming, because the Steelers took away the run game. That was not a factor. They dominated that part of the game. But where they were messing up was they were allowing too many big plays to anybody in the passing game. You had 6 different Bengals receivers, targets, because they weren't all receivers. Some of them were running backs, but 6 different Bengals offensive weapons getting 20 more or 20 yards or more on receptions. And that can't happen when you're trying to put together a defensive performance. Also, 3 touchdown goes to a Samaje Perine. Not the day you want out of that. T. Higgins catches 9 passes on 13 targets for 148 yards. That's a terrible look as well. You're going through a lot of these plays. Irwin getting 42 yards and a touchdown on you. Tyler Boyd, 2 catches for 42 yards. That's actually not terrible, compared to how good that guy is. I've seen that guy since high school make a lot more plays. So that part was actually contained pretty well. But as far as, the other parts of this, I think that the Bengals were able to key in on specific matchups that the Steelers didn't have many answers for. And they were specifically going at guys like Robert Spillane, like Arthur Maulet. And I talked about them in my post game a little bit. And there were times where both of those players had redeeming moments, but they were not the redeeming moments that ever recovered enough for what the Steelers needed to do. And I felt like there were some preparation points the Steelers needed to have better getting ready for this game to avoid those points where the Bengals could go after those specific players. And they did certain things that I thought were very smart. They would motion T. Higgins away from the side where Minkah Fitzpatrick was a lot during this game and kind of force him to either follow him and kind of show, hey, you're in man coverage, or don't follow him like he did a lot in this game, and they could go after the matchup that they really wanted because T. Higgins is a very good receiver. And I feel like that was the problem that the Steelers continued to run into in this game was, the guys that they tried to run a lot of bump and run coverage, a lot of single coverage, a lot of press coverage in this game, and they were getting beat. They didn't have the guys to do that. I think Cam Sutton held his own for a lot of this game. Like, there was one play that he did give up. But, I think Levi Wallace started out strong, but as the game went on, he got picked on. Maulet got picked on. Edmonds got picked on. I think the only guy that really wasn't picked on much was Minkah Fitzpatrick because Joe Burrow did a very good job avoiding him. I asked Levi Wallace after the game, we all we're asking him, but I wanted to get a sense from him. What were the Bengals doing schematically? And just listen to the way he responds. He puts it more on the Steelers' execution, but you can hear how he talks about when we started kind of needle in and talk about all the different things that the Bengals were doing. Here's Levi Wallace in the Steelers' locker room after the game.
Higgins kind of gassed you guys in man-to-man situations all day. What was it about him that made him hard to cover and made you guys unable to stop him for the most part today?
They do a great job of scheming him to get open. Not giving us the same looks, different routes when they do show the same looks. And so, he's a good player.
Were there things they did today that you guys didn't see on film or weren't prepared for to get some of those opportunities?
No, we just have to make more plays on the ball, be in better position. Give them credit. We got a good team, and they're able to get the job done.
Levi, why are they able to have success with the running backs passing them the football?
I don't know. We got to go back and look at film. I'm covering receivers most of the part, and so go back and look and see, what's what. But like I said, they got good backs too. You know what I mean? So when you got guys who can make plays, especially in the backfield, you have to be alert where they're at.
You guys, sorry if you've already been asked this, who just jumped in, but I believe 6 different receivers for them had 20-plus yard plays today. What were they doing that was so frustrating and challenging to you guys?
I don't know if it was more of them. They got some good players, but, we have to be better. I know my play on the sideline, I knew I should have looked faster. That's on me. Kind of rolled up a little bit. We got to get them out of bounds. Give those guys credit. They came and schemed us. Fourth quarter football, they start figuring out what you're in. They made plays when they had to. We have to be better than that.
So you heard him talking about, them needing to execute better. And that's what players are going to say. That's player speak. That's what they're trying to get through. But I think part of what he was talking about was scheming to get T. Higgins open was, again, the motion to trying to get him away from guys. The Steelers normally, when they face a key receiver they want to take out of a game, they bracket them. And that's what they did so well against teams like the Buccaneers, against the Dolphins, when they were able to very much limit Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill against Tua Tagovailoa and how good the Dolphins offense had been. The Steelers have done a very good job on a lot of opponents this year. Not all of them, because, teams like the Eagles and the Bills handed them their you-know-whats. But, but they've done a really good job in a lot of games, especially in the first game against the Bengals, figuring out ways to bracket guys. When I say bracket, I mean one defender covers the front side of his route, the other defender covers the back side of the route, and tee up on these guys. But, and this was something that Alan Saunders brought up on the final word with me, he's like, you know what? Sometimes that's what happens when a divisional opponent comes in with 2 weeks of preparation, like the Bengals did, and they get to tee off on you. And it was something that the Steelers got the advantage of last week when they played the Saints. And that was something I think the Bengals deserve a lot of credit for scheming to get these guys away from them. But still, this was a way where I think the Steelers game plan when it comes to Mike Tomlin, Brian Flores. Well, Brian Flores less as much because he was the linebackers, but Teryl Austin, they needed to find a way to be able to neutralize that, to get their guys back to finding ways to kind of bottle up those receivers and those plays. And some of it is on the field. Like, for example, Levi Wallace later talked about the one play on Irwin where it was a short play that he was in front of. He could have made a tackle. He didn't. He lets it go for a long play, and that leads to a touchdown later. Robert Spillane was in position to stop one of the passes to Perine short, and into the flat. Didn't make the play, missed the tackle, gives up the sideline. It's a touchdown. There's plenty of plays where they could have done it, but still, I felt like there were parts where this could have been schemed better. There were times that I think that they could have found ways to match up. And again, they've done it a lot this year. Heck, in the Dolphins game, they got diced up on the first drive. They made the mid-game adjustments, and they figured it out. I think that in this game, the Bengals made some of those early on. The Steelers kind of adjusted for a little bit, and that's why you kind of saw that lull of scoring for a while. But then eventually the Bengals cracked it again late, and this became a game where their offense just was putting up too many points for the Steelers to keep up with, even though they almost did because they lost by 7. They still put up 30 points themselves. And this goes into, again, kind of what Levi was talking about. They do need to execute better, but the Bengals picked at the weaknesses of this defense. TJ Watt wasn't able to be the ridiculous playmaker that he is. He still made ridiculous plays. That interception is crazy the way he pulled that off. But he wasn't able to get into the backfield as much. Granted, yes, lots of holding and things that weren't called, but you have to look past that if you're the Steelers and still find ways to win. And in this game, the Bengals were able to kind of neutralize TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, for the most part. Highsmith did get a sack, and I think Cam Hayward got a sack as well. And they were able to avoid Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that was a huge part of their game. Don't test him. And I think that's something that Joe Burrow did learn from the last time. And in doing so, they went after Spillane. They went after Miles Jack. They went after Arthur Maulet. They went after Terrell Edmonds. And Terrell Edmonds had some plays trying to cover in the slot where it didn't work well. The Steelers needed to be more coordinated in those opportunities, and they just weren't. And I think that was a game planning failure on their part, and something that they got to be able to make sure that they're keying up for this next stretch of games, especially with the Indianapolis Colts on Monday Night Football. But the offense, we got to talk about them too. They actually put up 30 points. Didn't think that was going to happen, win or lose. We want to talk about that, but there were still some hiccups, and I did some charting after the game that I want to go into because I think it kind of paints a picture of what Matt Canada was trying to do, what he failed to do, and the things that they got right early on. We'll talk about that in a bit here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our friends at Total Wine and More. With this holiday coming, find what you love at Total Wine and More. With so many great bottles to choose from, it's easy to find a new favorite single barrel bourbon or the perfect gifts for everyone on your list with some help from a friendly guide. And all with the confidence of knowing you found something special for the lowest price. Find what you love what you find. Only at Total Wine and More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly, B21. We're also brought to you by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, whenever you want it, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., Canada, and the UK. Book a spacious SUV or a minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, a birthday, or a holiday. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from point A to point B. Test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Ditch boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. All right. Well, when we read back-to-back ad reads, we keep it rolling here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's switch to the offense here. Now, I thought that was interesting, and this was talked about by our friend Brian DeArdo, written about by our friend Hunter Homostek on Pittsburgh Sports Now and SteelersNow.com. And it was Jermaine Pratt, one of the Bengals defenders, when asked about what helped the Bengals settle in the second half, and he said, "We just settled down. It was us giving them plays. We knew what they were going to do. They like to do the same plays over and over." And of course, that immediately sent shockwaves all over the place after the game, where it's like, "Whoa, the Steelers did the same plays over and over." And I did feel that this was probably the biggest game where I could look at Matt Canada and say, like, man, this is the ultimate example of doing things one way right and then doing things the complete opposite way in the second half. So I wanted to do some charting because I was very curious about when the Steelers chose to run the ball versus pass the ball on the early downs to set up Kenny Pickett, because I also felt Kenny Pickett, this was actually probably his best game. He avoided the big mistakes. He connected on a big touchdown pass. He got them down the field. Heck, the offense scored 30 points. But I think a big part of it's also because it was a huge game for Najee. And Najee was able to get 90 yards on the ground, 116 all-purpose, and got 2 touchdowns in the game. I thought he did as much as you could ask of him. And the run game in general did work for the Steelers. I mean, Najee Harris averaged 4.5 yards per carry. Kenny Pickett got a couple runs off, averaging 7 yards per carry. Deontay Johnson, Steven Sims, none of their runs worked, but still, you did what you wanted to do in the trenches there to make that work. when I looked back at all the plays, the Steelers ran the ball 9 times on first down and called passing plays 18 times on first down. On those 9 runs, 8 of them were to Najee Harris. One of them was to Steven Sims, but 8 of them were to Najee Harris. And on those 8 runs, he averaged 5.3 yards per carry. And to me, this is a big part of why the Steelers do run so much on the early downs, is because when he's doing that, a lot of times Najee Harris is setting up the chains for success. The Steelers were staying ahead of the chains early. I think they started 5 of 7 on third downs for the game. They finished 3 of 10 the rest of the way, and that's where they fell apart in the second half. They had so many 3 and outs, and that kind of took away the Steelers' chance to keep the defense fresh in the second half and give them a chance to make more plays. But also on second downs, because you look at those plays, the Steelers called 11 run plays and 12 pass plays on second downs. And when I was looking at the success of when first downs were achieved in those down and distance situations, when the Steelers ran the ball on first down, again, of the 8 times that Najee Harris ran the ball on first down, 7 of them eventually led to first downs, meaning that on that down and distance situation, the Steelers either converted a first down or got a touchdown in those series. And only one of the times Najee Harris ran on first down, they didn't get a first down afterwards. And I felt like that was something that did change in the second half. Most of those conversions and those situations came in the first half when the Steelers were running the ball and then letting that kind of set up Kenny Pickett. And then in the second down plays, you saw success on both sides of running and passing in the first half, and then it kind of waned in the second half. And again, it was very even as far as run plays and pass plays called on second down. I thought that would be more of an eye opener as far as what went wrong. This still comes down to execution all the times, but this was the time when I thought Matt Canada had a good game called up in the first half and then stopped doing the things that I think set up the good game, which was running more on first down, trying to establish the Steelers on the ground more, trying to be able to say, hey, let's get this drive going. Let's keep let's stay ahead of the chains to give Kenny Pickett a chance, because even though the offensive line didn't pass protect well, they were running the ball well. It's so crazy because early on in the year, we talked about how they couldn't run block to save their lives, but they were pass protecting well. And now it seems to have flipped in the last couple of weeks as we saw them run block well against the Saints, kind of give Kenny Pickett some trouble in pass protection last week. And the same thing goes this week. So again, inconsistent offensive line play, but I wanted to give you a chance to listen to Najee Harris and what he talked about after the game, just talking about how they do need to be better. And yeah, there's excitement that they figured out how they could score 30 points in a game, but they know that's not good enough when they lose. Again, here's Najee Harris after the game in the Steelers locker room.
We just came out at the half, just not firing, and that was just on just people on the field, nobody else.
Najee, how frustrating is it to be back in this position?
It's not good, but we're just trying to be here in the stat bricks. What happened today. It was a tough one. We really wanted this one, but we got to move on to the next one.
Are there any signs of encouragement that you can take from putting together a first half like the one that you guys had?
Yeah, dude. First half, you said?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of good stuff we put on film. Obviously, we scored points. One time, I think we were 5 for 7 on third down. So that was just, we're building from there. And I think today we scored 30. It was our first time all season scoring 30, right? So there's good, but obviously it's not good enough. And in the NFL, you need to be good enough to win these games. You need to execute on the important downs, just like that driver was talking about. For us to succeed, it all comes down to the big plays, and we didn't really execute on that.
What do you think was the biggest difference between the first half and second half for you guys?
Man, I don't. I'll see in film, but I mean, I know that third down we didn't do a lot good, did we? I believe so. We didn't do as good as we did the first half, so that was probably good.
The Bengals.
Well, part of the reason that they didn't do as well on third downs because they were setting themselves up for worse third down situations. They were getting further back. Some of it was penalties, some of it was mistakes, some of it was just not winning on the earlier downs. And that I feel like was a big part of it. In the first half, they were doing such a good job at setting up down distance, making it third and manageable so many times for Kenny Pickett. And the few times that it wasn't, then he only had to overcome it once or twice in the first half. And that's what allowed them to have success and put up 20 points in a half of football, something that we didn't think that we'd see from the Steelers offense. But in the second half, you saw that kind of go away. I think it's because I think there were times they tried to get too cute. The flea flicker, I did feel like was quite a bit much. And this was a game where I was like, Matt Canada, again, yes, you see the concepts are there in your playbook, but the timing as far as how you did it in the second half, I did think caused a problem in this game. And again, I don't blame it as much of this one on Kenny Pickett as we've looked at the film in the past. And again, I was in the press box. I was watching it from above. There were times that he did not see the open wide receiver, the open target that would have helped on certain plays where he didn't, where the Steelers stalled with their offense. But it was much fewer and far more far between than we've seen in times this year. I do think Kenny Pickett is making progress. I do think that he's seeing the field better and he's taking steps forward. And I do think he's going to figure it out. I said this before when they drafted him, like, he's not going to come in and be perfect, but he's going to be the guy that scraps, that figures things out and works to get better and makes real progress that you see carry with him. And I think you're starting to see that. This is back-to-back games. He hasn't thrown in interceptions. This is now, I think, and again, they put up 30 points in this game. He had 265 yards through the air. Still, missed opportunities here and there, and an offense that's still looking for its identity. But I do think this offense is finding an identity with being able to run the ball. Jaylen Warren wasn't even available to back up Najee Harris in this game because he pulled his hamstring early, and Najee Harris still 20 carries, 90 yards, 116, all-purpose yards. I think those are good signs for the offense, but still stalling when they did, especially in the second half. When you look at some of the possessions, as much as the defense deserves blame for giving up 37 points, because that's unacceptable when you're supposed to be playing at a higher level, you look at the times that they got stops. The Steelers defense comes out, forces a punt to start. They give up a short field for a touchdown because the Steelers offense again was 3-and-out. They had 3 straight 3-and-outs to start, and then 4 straight 3-and-outs to all in the third quarter. And I think that was a big part of what went wrong for the Steelers. But even after that touchdown that they gave up in the third quarter, TJ Watt gets that interception. The offense hands the Bengals a short field. The defense holds them to a field goal. Then in the fourth quarter to start, they're able to the Steelers get to pin them deep. They play renegade. The Steelers 3-and-out them, give the ball to the offense in plus territory. They're in Bengals territory, and nothing comes of it. They get I think 1 first down, and then just making sure this was the right one. Yes, they got 1 first down, and then they had all the penalty yards that they called it back. And you got to be more disciplined there. And I think that there's blame to be going around. But if we're being honest, this is probably the game where I throw the least blame on Kenny for a lot of it. I think there was times the offensive line getting beat, Dan Moore getting beat at the wrong points in time. J.C. Hassenauer had to go in there for Mason Cole because of a foot injury. That kind of dampened things a little bit, in my opinion. Pat Freiermuth being called for a hold. There were just things that I thought that got sloppier as the game went on, and you saw the mediocreness of the offense return in the second half, which I guess is going to happen. But still, I think that part of the problem was in the second half. Again, you had 5 times in the first half when you were able to get you were able to move the sticks by running the ball on second down, 5 times as well when you ran the ball on first down. When you were running the ball early, I think it allowed you to keep that manageable down and distance. It doesn't mean run all the time, but I do think that with Najee Harris' success in averaging 5.3 yards per carry on first down, as he did in this game, he averaged 3.6 yards per carry on second downs. But still, on those second downs, if they're second and 5, 2nd and 7, that makes it 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, and that's acceptable. The 2nd and 10 runs, okay, that could be a problem. But to be fair, when I was going back and charting it, there was really only, I think, 2 times that I looked at it where it was a 2nd and 10 or 2nd and 9 run play where it didn't produce a favorable result. Like, for example, on the field goal drive right after the interception, it was 2nd and 10. They called a run play. It got 6 yards. 3rd and 4, very manageable. That's a plus there. There was a 2nd 10 on the second touchdown drive where they got 4 yards and set up a 3rd and 6. That's acceptable there. Those are the play calls. Those aren't the play calls that I have as much of a problem with. As far as Jermaine Pratt saying the Steelers ran the same plays over and over, if they ran the same plays over and over and they still scored 30 points, I think that's a good sign that the offense is moving towards the right direction. But they still got a lot to fix up. We'll talk more about that in the next segment here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is, of course, Daily fantasy made easy. Forget about trying to go and play daily fantasy against a million people and trying to pick the one right lottery setup of a lineup. Prize Picks is here to make it fun, easy, and fast. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players that you think you have a beat on for how they're going to play in fantasy that day, and then all you have to do is guess whether they're going to have more or less than a certain stat that's been put up by Prize Picks, and you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against others, just guessing against Prize Picks projections. Prize Picks also does the NBA and NHL and the college sports and so much more. Download the Prize Picks apps or go to prizepick.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First time users receive 100% its deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, all capital letters, all one word when you go to the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're going to wrap it up here by talking more about, I think, some of the things the Steelers needed to find balance in this game, because there were times, I think the Steelers, in the first half, there were times when they were picking each other up and they needed to play complementary football, and there were times they did. Especially towards the end of the first half, the Steelers defense gets an interception and the offense takes it down and turns into a field goal. The offense had 4 straight scoring drives in the first half, which you thought you'd never see. They had a field goal, 2 touchdowns, and a field goal. And that last field goal might have been a touchdown drive if they had more than 31 seconds with the football. But still, a very positive outcome there. But I think you see the offense, they know they have to clean things up. The defense knows they need to clean things up. And you got to give full credit to the Bengals for exploiting things. And yes, you could point to things like the first touchdown should have been called back for illegal man downfield and an illegal block in the back. You could have called a lot of different holding penalties that kept Joe Burrow clean in a lot of different plays. But still, you look at the bulk of the game, again, 6 receivers with catches of 20 yards or more. That does come down to game planning. And that's where I felt like they had the biggest advantage over the Steelers in this game was for Joe Burrow to find those guys in the right spots. The Steelers have to come out of this and they have to realize a few things. One, I do think as much as Arthur Maulet, I think Arthur Maulet is a fire starter. I think that he is a guy that has the right passion for the game, but he is just not a cover corner. And I mean, not that that's shocking anybody. We knew that. But the whole point of Arthur Maulet in this defense was supposed to be the blitzing corner who was physical, kind of like Mike Hilton, but with less cover skills. And that's where I think that they've been lacking the most. And I think that a big way to fix that is to, in games when you're knowing, and don't do this every week, because you know what, you're going to face the Ravens at some point, and you won't have to worry about all these different receivers and all this different passing game and the way that they attack, because they're going to try to run the ball, and that might be a time to use Arthur Maulet. But when you go up against teams that like to throw the ball more, that like to spread it around to different receivers like the Bengals do, you got to be able to, I think you got to be able to put someone in the slot who you're not afraid of succeeding there. And I think in this game, it would have been prudent to say, hey, Arthur, you're fighting. We're not saying you're not. We're going to bump Cam Sutton inside. We're going to give James Pierre time on the outside. That would have made sense, in my opinion, to do it mid-game. And that was one of those in-game adjustments that the Steelers didn't do in this game that I think could have helped the outcome a bit there. But even amid all of that, there were other things that they could have done just positional-wise, lineup-wise, that I think really would have helped them. You know, we talked a lot about that 3 safety look. We didn't see it as much as I think we should have. And I get that you got to worry about the run game, and they did shut down the run game. But once Joe Mixon went out for injury, they should have been saying, hey, let's come out there in 3 safety looks more. Let's come out here and say, you know what, if you're going to pass, you're going to be throwing it at Minkah Fitzpatrick. You're going to be throwing it at DeMonte KZ more. And I felt like they should have done that in more situations. They should have found a way to get Cam Sutton to the inside, help there, and find ways to easier help the guys who were getting beat. And normally the Steelers have done that in a lot of games this year, even though they were 3-7 record. And you're thinking, well, Chris, they lost a lot of games. They didn't lose a lot of games like this. They lost the Bills and the Eagles games like this. And in those games, they didn't have a chance. At least in this game, they did have a chance. And their defense did make some crucial stops at times. They just weren't good enough to make enough stops in this game. But all that being said, I still think there's a lot to this defense they can clean up. And I think that this is a game where normally, at least in recent Steelers times, where the defense has a game like this, they rebound from it and they have a good game to follow it up with. And I think that against the Colts next Monday night, that could be the prime opportunity to show that, to do that, and to say, hey, you know what, we're coming out. It's just Matt Ryan. We gotta be aggressive. We gotta still stop Jonathan Taylor and do that. But they gotta be able to key in on this game, and they gotta make sure that they learn from those lessons and carry them forward. Because you look at this defense, and anytime that I see Robert Spillane motion out into the flat and have to run with a running back, I'm like, well, that quarterback's going there. I mean, myself and my man Raymond Porter, we were saying it like as soon as it happened. Heck, James Rapine was sitting like 2 rows in front of me, and like half the Bengals reporters saw that motion, like they're going there. And it was funny, the play that they did that about, they didn't even go there. They went up, they tested Arthur Maulet on a deep pass to T. Higgins, and that's where the Bengals are going to try and isolate and get those guys. The Steelers have to find ways to limit how teams are going at the weak spots of their defense. That's what good defenses do. They didn't do in this game. They've done it before in this season. I think that was the biggest letdown of this game. And again, that came down to game planning. Now, I'll say all this to say, a lot of times when people say, oh yeah, it is the coaching, it's always been the coaching. And that's where I'm like, oh, okay, relax. The coaching had a good game plan against Miami. The coaching had a good game plan against the Jets. The coaching had a good game plan a lot of times this year. But the problem is I think that people always blame coaching for everything. And I'm like, there's a lot of things that was execution. This play was on the field. This was a game where I felt like in these situations, there were still plays that should have been made. Levi Wallace shouldn't have let Irwin get out on the big play he did. Perine should have been tackled by Robert Spillane in the red zone, and the Bengals going 3 for 3 in the red zone. That's bad. But still, I think there were times that the Steelers coordinators, the Steelers defensive game plan could have put these guys in better positions to make those plays, and that was a big letdown in this game. And then the same thing offensively in the first half. Again, good aggressive plan, letting Kenny Pickett go after it, letting Najee Harris run the ball and be aggressive, and then they kind of went away from that in the second half and kind of fell into the shell of who they have been, with only a field goal until the final drive of their final drive of the game, where they got a touchdown and then had to kick an onside kick with 45 seconds left. All that being said, the Steelers are now 3-7, so now they are, they can lose one more game and still manage to have a winning record. It's looking very bleak that will ever happen. This probably will be a losing season for them, but I do think that they are picking up nuggets that they are able to carry them forward. Remember, this is a very young team, and this team was never going to be a Super Bowl contender. But I do think you're starting to see Kenny Pickett understand some things. You're starting to see Najee Harris understand some things, especially with this offensive line. And I think that this offensive line, they're not going to all be here, but much longer. I think that after this, the Steelers are going to draft some guys very early. I think they're going to sign some guys, put some more expensive contracts out there. They're going to be investing in this offensive line very, very soon. I think George Pickens is taking steps up. Pat Freiermuth is taking steps up. There's guys figuring out parts of this team, and then defensively, I think Devin Bush is playing better. Granted, again, there's other linebacker spots that need some answers, but there are guys figuring things out. They're not figuring them out fast enough to win games this year. But again, this year was always about trying to build to see what you can get this year. Or what you can get for next year, and see who are going to be your foundational guys moving forward. We'll see how the Steelers rebound next week, and we'll talk about more this week. Now that once I get a chance to go over more film, give you my grades tomorrow. Now that when it's not 2:45 in the morning when I'm recording, as I am now. But we'll go over this more this week. But I do think that there is a sense that, like, hey, there are as Najee Harris said, like, there are improvements that they're making. They're just not enough to win right now, and that's the bottom line as far as that's going to define their season. I do think, though, there's still a lot to talk about where this team is going, and the people that need to keep going with the team as they go there, and the people that they should probably decide on leaving to the wayside, whenever this season winds down. We'll talk about who those people are in a bit more this week. Thanks for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. Again, I do apologize for the show coming out so late. Had a very long day. Had to do TV on the final word. It was a very fun show, though, with Doug Whaley and Alan Saunders and Albie Oxenreiter over there at Channel 11. I'll be back tomorrow with my grades, talking more about your Pittsburgh Steelers here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Hang in there, Steelers fans. I know it's a rough year, but they're going to keep fighting, and we hope hope that you stick with us here in the Locked On Steelers podcast to keep track of them every step of the way. Again, we'll be back tomorrow with our grades here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I cover Pitt sports and all the things that are going on there. That basketball game, they almost lost, but they found a way to dig it out. I'll have a film piece on Pitt football coming out on Monday, and we'll have you all covered along with there. But again, Locked On Steelers, check us out here. Back tomorrow with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers.